Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Development's fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room, and today I have an incredible guest, my first guest ever from Cape Town, South Africa, Juan Coetzee, also known as the Oracle. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. It's quite exciting. I had a conversation with my wife right now, and in terms of having this discussion, it's actually exciting to be able to share a passion that we all have. We see it on Instagram right now. We all sort of connected on a spiritual level with a true passion, and that's fly fishing.
I think that's so true, is that we met on Instagram and I just was like, wow, you have such incredible photos. You have to have some great fishing stories. And it's great with technology that you get to share it with me today. And I'm ready to hear one of your fishing stories.
The best story, I suppose, and it sort of speaks true to my personality structure and the way that I've approached fishing or life, as it were, was I've just returned from the UK, and that was in 1999. So I spent 3 years in the UK playing rugby and doing work there. My fiance was over there as an occupational therapist. We returned to South Africa, and I got involved in doing workshops or lectures at the universities in South Africa. So we're based in Cape Town, and I had to go up to the north of the country, so the middle of the country, which is called the Free State, and there's the city there is called Bloemfontein, and then up to Johannesburg, and then I was going to come down the coast, on the east coast, and go fishing there. Any case, so it was in the early days of my saltwater fly fishing experience, and I packed in, I just bought a 9-weight and a nice T-bow reel and 2 lines, and arrived in Bloemfontein and got hold of a fly fishing magazine. And in the fly fishing magazine, they had this article on an island just off Maputo and Mozambique coast called Inyaka. And they had these amazing photos of GTs and barracudas. And the information was you could stay like on tented accommodation. There's a charter. You get a flight from Maputo to Inyaka. And while driving up to Johannesburg, I thought, jeepers, why don't I just do that? I've got like a week to spare to kill before I have to get into the Eastern Cape. And the information was very cryptic in terms of getting onto this island. So I knew you had to get to Maputo and you have to go to the border posting near the Kruger National Park. So the Kruger National Park is the big sort of nature conservation where you get lions and elephants, and you have to drive up there to this border posting. So everything was very sketchy because I knew as soon as you go into Mozambique that it's a bit lion country. And what I mean with lion country, anything can happen there. I knew you could get arrested for speeding, and then you had to pay bribes to get out of these things. But I was super ambitious. I had my mind set, I'm going to Inyaka with only one rod. Remember, I had only one rod with me. It's ridiculous. Now I've got a whole barrage of rods and reels, only rod and a box of flies. I just started tying saltwater flies at that stage as well. So in any case, I drove up to Nelspruit, which is, I think, about an hour away from the border posting of Mozambique. And I knew I had to be careful driving into Mozambique. So I got to the border posting, but everything is about timing going into the deeper side of Africa. So the flight going to Inyaka from Maputo, you couldn't book beforehand. You couldn't book anything beforehand. You couldn't book the accommodation. You couldn't book the flights. I found out that you can store your car in Maputo and then you get a taxi to the airport, and I got this sorted out. I've got it. I've got it covered. I've got my rod. I've got everything. Janae was very upset with me, my wife, and said, no, this is crazy. And I said, no, I'll be fine. I'll make it up as I go along. So in any case, I arrived eventually in Maputo, And at the first rowboat, a traffic warden pulled me over. And I think, oh my word, here we go. And he said, no, I'm going to arrest you. And I said, well, what are you arresting me for? He says, no, you made an illegal turn. And I said, no, there's no illegal turns here. He said, no, you must give me your passport. And I was really cocky at that time. I've got ginger hair, so I've got a bit of a temper on me. And I said to him, okay, well, take me to your police station and we can discuss it there. And he said to me, no, it's okay, you can drive. Okay, so that's the first hurdle that I crossed. Well done. And I found the place where I had to park the car. It's like a garage, overnight garage. And then I had to get a taxi to get to the airport. The problem with taxis in Africa, specifically in Maputo, they don't abide by any rules or norms or anything. And everywhere is potholes. And I knew I had a half an hour to get to the airport. So yeah, I'm in the taxi, one rod, driving through this track. And it's absolutely madness. It's chaos. You can't believe it. So Maputo used to be part of the Portuguese, I think one of their colonies, and used to have beautiful infrastructure, but everything imploded. So when you take the taxi, they drive on the pavement, they don't stop for red lights or robot, we call it in South Africa, and it's absolute carnage. So eventually got to the airport, got in the queue in front of me, and there was this American couple right in front of me. So we're now queuing, and they were right in front of me, and we arrived we have to now board and get the ticket. And I paid for my ticket, they paid for the ticket, and we went to the next stop. And I think the person serving them there at the desk said they must pay an entry fee. And I listened to that, and I thought, no, man, that doesn't sound right. We just pay tickets. Why do we have to pay an entry fee? So the couple paid the entry fee, and I arrived there, and he said, and I think it was like $50. So they work in dollars for some strange reason in Maputo. And I said, okay, but can you give me a receipt? And he said, no, that's fine. You can go. All right. After all that rigmarole, I thought, you can't really go worse. So got into the plane. It wasn't luxury. The doors couldn't close properly. It was this twin-engine plane that hobbled over to Inhaka Island. And we landed there in literally a field. There were cows walking around. There was this one rickety building standing there. So on the island, there's two kinds of accommodation. The one is a lodge, a primary lodge for obviously tourist people. And then there's this backpackers, which is almost like camping accommodation. And we landed. It was just me and this couple in the airplane. And a car came to pick them up. The airplane took off, and there I stood. I had no clue what now. And it was getting dark, so I thought, no, I'm in trouble here. So per chance, one of the locals came past, and I sort of explained to him and sort of figured it out that he'll take me to this tented accommodation. I think I had to pay him like $20 to help me to get this accommodation. So you don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, I was really getting a bit nervous of, how do I get to this accommodation? I don't know anything. So eventually, everything went out well, and I arrived at the accommodation. It was super nice. It was this couple. They were ex-Zimbabwean pets, and they started this camping accommodation. And I told them, look, I want to go fishing the following day. And they said, that's fine. They will arrange for me. There was an operator that had small boats, and they'd take you to the different areas. So the areas that I wanted to fish was, I think, just off the island, there was a reef, a shallow reef. And there was a lot of barracudas and GTs and different species hanging around there. And then there was an island called Portuguese Island. And then where the continent of Africa splits away from Inhaka Island, there was a big channel there, and they call it Hell's Gate. So those were the areas that I wanted to go fish. So the next morning, I woke up. I'm super stoked. I'm ready for this. Fly rod in hand. The guide came to pick me up, and we walked down to the pier, and here was this boat. And I don't know if you know the term a canoe.
Yes.
So he basically had a canoe with an outboard at the back. And I'm thinking to myself, no, this is not right. You can't go out in the open ocean with this thing. So I asked him, do you have life jackets? He says, no, there's no need. This thing floats. In any case, being myself out there, well, I'm here. What's the worst that can happen? Blind luck, I went out. So we went out, and it's absolutely beautiful there. I mean, if you ever get the opportunity, just go Google Inhaka Island. It's It's pristine. It's absolutely beautiful. It's this amazing island with green, beautiful blue ocean, really spectacular. So eventually we arrived at the first day. My focus was going to be on the shallow reef just off the island. And I kid you not, we arrived there in 3 casts. I hook up to this massive barracuda. So what I took with was a 9 weight, not a 12 weight, not a 14 weight. And within the first take, this barracuda snaps my rod completely. And I'm like, oh no, this is absolutely devastating. You know, when you get that deep seeking feeling in your stomach and you realize you've just run the gauntlet to get onto this island and now it's all over. So Nathan, I got this guy to, with his canoe, get us back to the island and trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I found out, well, the following morning there's a flight back, and I realized I'm defeated. Yeah, I might as well get back. And dread. I was so upset with myself. Any case, so the evening I went, there's a village there. I went to the village and I thought I'll have a couple of cold ones and drown my sorrows, because that's all I could do. And as I was sitting down, there was this British couple sitting next to me. And I think they were from Kent or somewhere in England. So I started to talk to them just in general terms and what they were doing. So they were staying at the resort. And I started talking, about fishing. And he used to salmon fish. And he said, "But chance, he brought some rods with." And I'm like, "All right, great." And he said, "You know what? I've got a old fly fishing rod there. I think it's like a 10 weight. You can have it." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Yeah, I need to pay you for it." He says, "No, just buy me a beer." So obviously I bought him more than one beer, and it was a brilliant evening. I mean, I woke up with a severe hangover the next morning, ready to take on Portuguese island. And I mean, the fishing after that was amazing. I really, Portuguese island's beautiful. What's amazing about it, there's nobody there. So you're really isolated. You're really in touch with nature. It's raw. It's true raw Africa. And the fishing was amazing and everything was going well. And so I thought, so on the way back, so with the flights, you can't really book the flights. And I didn't want to stay over Maputo because Maputo is really third world, deep Africa. And I woke up the morning, the last day, and I got to the airfield. They took me this time by car, so I was a bit more luxury driven. And the first flight was out at 10 o'clock. And somehow we found out that flight was cancelled. And the next flight was only at 2 o'clock. And I realized I'm up against it because the border post closed like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. So eventually, and everything had to work like clockwork. Everything had to go 100%. Otherwise, I'm stuck in Maputo and I didn't want to stay. There's just no decent accommodation or those days. So you didn't have a cell phone. There was nothing like that. Anyways, got back into this plane, rickety over the channel, landed in Maputo. The same thing, got the taxi there. This time I told the taxi, "Look, I don't care, you just drive." I had to pay extra for him to drive, extra more dangerous. And it was chaos. I mean, I sat in that taxi and thought, I'm definitely going to die here. This is the end of me. And eventually I got to the warehouse where I parked the car and there was nobody there. So I realized, okay, the time is now ticking. And I ran around there, eventually got to, and nobody speaks English there, and eventually got hold of a security person and he got the car out. So now I'm on my way to the border crossing. And I arrived, I think the border crossing, I can't really remember, Lauren, exactly, but say 5 o'clock. I arrived just 5 o'clock at the border crossing. So I went in, had my passport, and the security at border crossing said they can only allow me back in South Africa if I pay $50. And I'm like, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to pay back to get into South Africa. You must be stupid." So I had a massive argument with this guy, and he was warning me he's going to call the police. And my red hair just kicked in, my Irish heritage. And I got in my car and I drove through the border crossing. And I think I'm still a fugitive in Mozambique today. I think they've got a warrant of arrest out for me. And reflection, I mean, everything could have got wrong. But, hindsight is fabulous. It was a great adventure. It's a good story to tell. It was a bit cavalier. I'm not sure I'll do it that way again, having children right now. But still, I mean, if you go look at Inhaka, it's beautiful. What an amazing place. And Africa, yes, it's raw, but it's still amazing to be there.
Do you still have the 10-weight rod that the guy gave you?
Yeah, I actually do have it. It's like something, Snowby used to make rods way back. I don't know if you got Snowby there. And it's almost like the early rendition of airflow rods. It's actually not a fly rod. It's more a broom. I fished hard on Inaka, especially Hell's Gate, because the fish now have blisters on my hands because this rod wasn't balanced. So double hauling was cast. But yes, I still have the rod and I still have it. Yeah, I won't fish with it. And what a lovely couple. I suppose that's the nice thing about fishing is the people that you meet on the way.
It's like bad luck, but what such great luck to have somebody who's like, give me some beer or buy me a beer and give me the rod and we'll just enjoy the rest of your trip here. So I'm curious, how did you get into fly fishing?
Yeah, it's actually a very nice story. So my father is a reverend. What's funny, my father-in-law is also a reverend and my brother-in-law is reverend. So we've got in the Dutch Reformed Church, a deep heritage of reverends or preachers. I'm not sure what it would be, probably a preacher and religious.
Yeah, a preacher probably, yeah.
So my father was studying at Stellenbosch. So Stellenbosch is in the wine region of the Western Cape. It's a real pretty town. It's one of the first towns that was ever established in South Africa after the initial landing in the Western Cape. And it's a beautiful town, and it's surrounded by lots of vineyards. And my father was studying to become a preacher, and we lived there, for a big part of my formative years next to a river called the Eerste River. So that's the first river translated into English. And my father was also very, athletic and sport orientated. And at some point, him and his friends started to bass fish. And I think I was about 6 and 7 and went with everywhere. I mean, I went bass fishing. So in the wine regions, there's a lot of small farm dams. We call it dams over here. So it's basically a small mini reservoir that the farmers use to sort of collect water. And all of these dams have smallmouth or bigmouth bass in. And we used to go spinning and using different jigs for these things. And it was it was amazing. It was like this world opening up to me. I was obsessed. I can remember we went on Saturdays and I couldn't sleep due to the excitement. And then I'll start rigging my rod and I'll get hooks in my ears. And we caught, I've got photos of me holding bass that's as long as me. So nobody fished these waters. It was not like a known sport like today. And then we stayed next to this river, and I used to go swimming in the river and play in the river. It's not a massive, in UK terms, that will be more like a chalk stream size river. I'm not sure what you have in equivalent there. And I walked down one day up the river and I saw somebody fly fishing, and I was absolutely bemused by this. What are they doing? And I actually went to speak to the person who was a student studying there, and he said, no, this is fly fishing. I said, okay, well, what's that about? And he told me, a little inquisitive boy wanting to find out, and totally in awe of this fly fishing thing. I didn't know about it before that. And I ran home and I said to my dad, look, I want to fly fish. And he said, okay, well, let's get you going. So that's very important. The context of my fishing wasn't an apartheid. So we had sanctions. You just didn't get decent equipment. It was not readily available. And my dad got hold of somewhere secondhand fly fishing rod, not with a cork handle. I think it still had like a plastic spongy handle. I don't know if you remember those rods. Action was really not into it. He got a line somewhere, and I think it was like a fast sinking line, so it was not even a floating line. And somewhere we got hooks, and that's how I started fly fishing. And it took me a while to figure it out, actually, how to fly fish. Because initially you sort of stream feed and then pull the fly up the channels, and you would pick up trout. And I thought, this is amazing. This is next level. And so we kept on bass fishing for a long time. And then eventually what happened is my father had to finish his studies and had to go and become a preacher at a church. And we moved away from Stellenbosch, and it was devastating because it was truly nirvana. It's this beautiful town. We lived next to a river. I used to fish every day of my life. And then I sort of lost a bit of touch with fishing because I then sort of started becoming really involved in sport, like rugby specifically. It's quite all right in rugby. I did all right. I played first team rugby and first team cricket. And I lost my way a bit of fishing. And then I became a student at about 17, 18. And I studied in Wellington. So Wellington is also part of what we call the Boland region in the Western Cape. It's also part of the winelands. And Wellington is situated in all the fly fishing rivers in the Western Cape. So there's about 4 rivers there. Most of the rivers are predominantly rainbow trout and some brown trout. And I got there my first year, and I picked up my old rod, and my mom bought me a rod for Christmas that year because I heard about the fishing there. And I started to fly fishing extensively for the rainbow. So the rainbows were easier. It was more accessible rivers. And then there was a river we called the Witte. So the Witte is up in the mountains. You have to hike. It's about an hour to 2 hour hike, a rough terrain to get to this river. And the trout was extremely skittish because it was crystal clear water. I mean, it's those rivers where you see your flies shadow on the bottom of the river if it floats past. And I started to fish there obsessively. I mean, that's the period that I went through relationships like other people went through milkshakes, I suppose, to use it, because I just couldn't stop fishing. I mean, I missed dates with girlfriends because I went fishing, and often asked, you must make a choice, fishing or it's terrible. I'm embarrassed to say this. It's embarrassing. I mean, I got really dumped. I was selected to play the equivalent of provincial cricket, but you had to go to trials, and it was a perfect day. And I thought that the trials were. Sorry, I don't want to tell you a story in the midst of it, but the trials were like 12 o'clock on a Saturday, and I decided, okay, well, I'll go the morning and I'll go fishing, and then I'll still have enough time to get trials. And I got completely lost in fishing, and about 2 o'clock I realized, oh my words, I forgot about the trials, and I never got selected for the team, and I'm not sad about it because the fishing was brilliant. Anyway, moving on from there, so fishing went on like that, and then I was in the Navy for about 2-3 years. Also fished, but not that extensively. And then my wife today, she went over to the UK, and heartbrokening, I decided, okay, well, let's go to the UK. And the UK started to open up for South Africa. So apartheid just fell away, and we could start traveling again, and the opportunities opened up there. And I arrived in the UK, and I did some forensic assessments for local authorities, court work, and also played club rugby, which was amazing. So obviously arriving in the UK, and that's the heartbeat of fly fishing. And I always had this dream of owning a Shakespeare rod, because that's the only rods that we knew about, the expensive rod. And I went, and I mean, most people in fly fishing would know about Follows of Pall Mall in the UK. And I saved up a bit of pounds, and I walked in there, and I met my mentor in fly fishing, and a person that just made me think differently about fishing is Brian Frattel. So he was the fly fishing director of Follows, and I walked in there with this £100, and I said, look, I want to buy myself a rod. And he says, what you're looking for? And I wanted a 3-weight, because all our streams in South Africa were 3 weights. So he said, he brought out a hardy. I still have the rod. I have it next to me. I actually took it out this morning just to have it next to me for this conversation. And the reel. So I said to him, look, I've got £100. He said, well, that doesn't buy you much. It doesn't even buy you a decent rod. And I'm like, oh, I'm gutted. So I said to Janae, my wife, and Brian said to me, you know what? I'll give you a Hardy Perfect. It was a 7'8" rod, and I'll give you a marquee fly reel and a floating line. And I guarantee you that you will be back to buy more rods from me in the future. And I conquered the world with that 3-weight. I mean, I fished so many streams. I fished the reservoirs. I think I've broke a few records in those reservoirs of catching big trout on the small little rod, the dinky little rod. And what was amazing, I think Brian thought that I stalked him, and I think I did stalk him. I would spend hours in that shop having conversations in his mind, the way that he analyzes fishing. He sort of immerses himself in fishing and understanding water movement and how fish relate to structure and bait fish. It was absolutely amazing to have these conversations. It's like almost playing, amateur rugby, and you're talking to an international rugby player. You had all of their knowledge base. And what was amazing about Brian, we struck up a really good friendship. And, we were saving to come back to South Africa ultimately. And he so follows had all these different beats on all the different salmon streams, on the chalk streams. And he would give it for free to me. He'll say, okay, Jean, we've got a beat opening up. Do you want it? I'm like, yeah, fabulous. But Brian, I don't have the right equipment. And he would give his rods and his reels to go fish. So I fished salmon streams. I fished the Wiley, which is in the Sutton Valley, and which is amazing. There you have to wear a tie and a jacket. You can't just go there in your your cap and your Sims shirt. You have to actually wear a tie to be able. You're not allowed to nymph fish. You're only allowed to dry fish. So that's sort of
Wow.
the passion. And then we came back to South Africa. My father fell ill and I had to come back. And on my way out, I said to Brian, look, I'm going to South Africa. There's so much coastline there. What would you recommend? And I bought a 9-way rod from him and a Tiber rod. And that's coming back to South Africa, started fly fishing again in the streams. And I just picked up on the saltwater fishing. I mean, today I don't even freshwater fish anymore. It's just the total emergence of being part of nature. I mean, just being in that water column, taking up the challenges and seeing this amazing fish that swim in the ocean, the power and the rawness of it. I mean, I've got sort of funny stories about holding big local species, which we call a garrick, so that we also call it a leerfish. And you probably see it on my Instagram. They've got this funny lateral line. It almost looks like a heartbeat. And the fish their skin feels, they don't have scales. It feels like leather, like a soft leather jacket. That's how their skin feels. And they're this amazing creatures, and you hold them in your hand. And I actually become emotional when I hold this big fish and you release them back into the water. And I suppose that's the connection, that spiritual connection where you're with nature. In my style of fishing, or the way that I like to fish, I want to be in the ocean. I want to feel the waves. I want to feel the sensation, the wind, and all of those components. Sorry, I'm getting carried away. Sorry.
No, honestly, it sounds, just listening to you describe the place where you fish, I mean, I think it just brings so much passion. And I think it's just interesting because obviously we have never met before, but the passion that I hear from you and your fly fishing, it's just the same as here in Montana. And despite that, we don't have, obviously, we aren't close to any saltwater fishing, but that feeling of just being on the river and listening to the water and just your surroundings. And then when you catch a fish, I mean, but that fish that what was it called again?
It's called a garrick.
Garrick.
Yeah, garrick. Garrick, garrick. So you find them in Spain and I think in Italy as well. And they're amazing. They're super predatory fish and they hunt in packs. So, and it's a visual, it's the visual component of fishing where you actually see these chases of this massive garrick chasing your fly. So you would cast out and you'll start stripping back. And there's also a specific way that you strip for them and you fish for them. And you just start seeing the water boiling, and you've got this, I wouldn't call it a shell because that sort of just fits in, but it's like a pack of hounds coming after your fly, and they hit the fly. So they use their body to almost stun the bait fish. So they would hit the fly from the side, and then they will turn on and they eat it. And it's actually a sensational fish to catch. Locally, and what's nice about them is that they're not easy to catch. So it's not a dime a dozen. You can't just arrive and expect to catch a garrick, especially the bigger ones. Sometimes they just don't want to eat, so they'll keep on chasing, but they won't eat. It's infuriating. I mean, I've had days on the reefs where I've got these meter leeries coming after, so we call him leerie. A leerie in Afrikaans is leather. So it's a leervis, a leather fish. And I would come off that reef and I'm shaking because all of this chases happen. You wouldn't catch a fish. So it's a very interesting species, how they hunt and how they function.
These fish just sounds like super fun to catch. And it takes skill because even though they're also weary of their surroundings. Like they're not going to just eat what you give them. What do you use to catch these fish? What are you fishing with?
There's two flies that you use, and I think Popovich started with this fly. So it's silicones. I don't know if you know the silicone fly. Basically, you spin like you build a tail with normal bucktail, as you would tie like a semper fly, and then you would spin almost like a inner of a cushion material, down material, and you will cut it in the shape of a fish. You will create the body structure with that, and then you put silicone, normal marine silicone, over it. And there's a specific way that you put it over. And what's amazing, it's my go-to fly for any. I mean, I'll tell you about other species we've got here as well called cob, which is amazing. But what I like about that fly, you get neutral buoyancy. So the problem with clouds, it's like a jig fly, right? Up and down, up and down. With a silicone fly, if you make the nose a bit flatter, so you just push with like a plastic piece of plastic, you just push the nose flat, and it creates a super action in the water. And what's amazing about fishing the silicone, I mean, you get a lot of spinning guys that go target leeries as well. And I mean, it's amazing how much fish you actually catch with a fly versus the guy that spins. And interesting, that's where the term oracle comes from. Because
your nickname.
Yeah. So I'm super lucky when it comes to fishing, and I tend to always catch fish, and I tend to catch a lot of fish. And I describe it as luck. I'm always scared. I always have nightmares that my luck is going to run out, which will be devastating. It hasn't, touch wood, it hasn't run out. But so the silicone creates this neutral buoyancy in the water. And if you look at bait fish, how bait fish respond and what they do, they don't hang in the water. They actually sit almost neutral buoyant in the water. It's like a weightless experience. And the silicone fly achieves that. And I mean, I use the silicone in Exmouth. I use it for so much fishing. It's like a guy. I can't actually, because garrick is such a finicky fish, you can't throw a semper fly or a deceiver at them or a clouser at them. They wouldn't even look at it. But as soon as you put a silicone in front of them, they will come and have a look.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because they're so honed in on mullet. And the way that mullet functions in the water. And it's interesting, I mean, I've looked at it. I don't like to experiment when I'm fishing. You don't change the skill if you're catching fish. But I've seen that if, say, for instance, I change to a clouser or a deceiver, the leeries don't look. And as soon as you put in the silicone, they're there. And they have a look, and they would have a bite. So it's a very interesting thing. And what's interesting about leeries as well, if you're standing next to me and we're a meter apart and I cast in a specific area and the leeries is there, I will catch the fish. You won't see fish. So they relate to structure differently. They like to be in front of structure. They don't like waves. They don't like big swell. So there's a lot of subtleties. I mean, the devil is always in the detail, I suppose. But that's such a challenging and amazing species to target. I mean, amongst the other wonderful species that we have, I mean, there's another style of fishing. So I've fished the strand of the reefs, and you can actually Google that. So you go Google strand reefs, Somerset West, Cape Town, and you'll see there's a lot of reefs hanging out there. And for garrick, I swim out on the reefs. So just keeping in mind, I hope my wife's not listening, that's sort of where white sharks hang out, and lots of shark species hang out there. And you actually swim out on those reefs and find reef where you can stand on. So you have to get onto the reef, you have to swim out there, find the reef, find the channel. So the other species that I target a lot is what we call cob. In Afrikaans, it's kabeljou. So it's a bit more prehistoric fish in its nature and the way that it looks. It's a bit more of an ambush fish, but at night it becomes more of an aggressive predator. So I swim out at night to these reefs. So what you
with do, sharks?
Yeah, we've got understanding, me and the sharks. Now you just need to be clever about it and know where you swim and where you go. So you go out anything from about 500 meters to a kilometer. Just before sunset on certain tides, you swim out on these reefs. And then what happens, there's specific channels that these carp come in at night, and they tend to be very nocturnal in the way that they hunt. And you would catch, it's amazing. I mean, I get so much busts up on carp on those reefs, because obviously you can't stop these massive fish. They grow to about 50 kilograms or something like that. And what tends to happen, you would hook up on them and they will run over the reefs and they'll break your tippet. But what's amazing about that fishing, you can actually, when you fish at night, I don't know how much night fishing you guys do, in the salt, so you've got the wind and you've got the waves and you've got the tides, and there's so many variables and so many things going on. and the water column changes and the rips changes. And you can actually, I don't know how it works, I can actually feel the fish in the water, the vibration of these carp moving in the water. So you would feel, as you retrieve your fly, you could feel the vibration of the carp swimming next to the water. It's amazing. And
How incredible. How do you see in the dark? Like, how do you,
well,
I mean,
yeah.
just your sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's the moon, obviously. So I mean, it's never dark out there. I mean, it depends if it's what's it called, dark moon. Then it's a bit gnarly, but you tend to, there's a bit of light coming from the city, so you get a bit of that. But it's also knowing those reefs and understanding the reefs. And obviously, I mean, you need to be careful out there. You need to know what you do. I mean, I always get people asking me, can I go with? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Can you swim? Yes, but have you ever swum in a rip current? No, I'm not sure. So I've had a bit of experiences where people go with and they could get a bit unstuck there. But it's amazing. I mean, what's amazing, as soon as that sunset, it's just you in the ocean, and it's actually dead quiet. I don't know if you've experienced that. You've got this ocean, the busyness and the sensory override of the day sort of passes, and you in nature, immersed in this, and you have to watch the tide, you landing fish. And I mean, from time to time, you hook sharks out there as well. I mean, there's a bronze whaler type of shark in South Africa. You can't land them. They're way too big and way too strong. And even if you had a 14 weight, you're going to get unstuck. And then you have to swim back. So, I mean, obviously I catch and release, and you release these amazing fish back into the ocean, and it's really rad. But it can be quite gnarly, to use a surf term. I used to surf, so excuse me for a bit of surfing term thrown into the mix.
No. Do you ever have any fears when you're out fishing, or is it just gone? You're just like, I know this water, this body of water.
Sorry for laughing.
Or yeah,
I think my wife has got the fears. I get a scolding ever. No, I'm actually, and that's my strength, and I suppose my weakness as well. I'm not a fearful person. And I'm not irresponsible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to do something that's completely irresponsible. But I think, it's understanding. It's respect. So we go into nature. Nature doesn't care if you're happy or sad, or you've got a cramp in your leg, or you broke a leg. Nature doesn't give anything about that. In the ocean specifically, it just moves on. So it's if you surf as well, it's having respect for where you go, understanding where you are. Understanding what nature would do with you if you get it wrong. It's like almost having, they talk about emotional intelligence and all of that. It's almost like having ecological intelligence and being mindful of where you are in the presence of nature, and respecting that.
I love that what you said, you need to be in tune with nature. I like that. So, Jean, if people want to maybe reach out to you and learn more about going to Cape Town and going fishing, is there a way that they could reach out to you, or are you kind of like?
They're more than welcome. I mean, we've got we've got one fly fishing shop here that I would really recommend to anybody, but they're more than welcome to contact me on Instagram. And that is JUAN_O_COETZEE. That's my Instagram. I think that's going to be the best way to get a hold of me. Interesting enough, the fly fishing shop is owned by one of our best cricketers ever, that played for South Africa cricket. So the fly fishing fraternity is small in South Africa. But they're more than welcome to contact me on Instagram if they want more information, if they just want to share a story. As you can hear, I mean, I'm really engrossed into fishing, and I think that's the nice thing about Instagram. I don't know if you've experienced that, Lauren. I mean, you look at people fishing in places that we never saw, and consistently, and I find that really amazing. I mean, I've learned things off Instagram. So somebody would tie a fly, and I will make contact with them and say, "What did you do there?" And they'll send me information. So we're consistently improving and consistently doing things better. And that's the nice thing for me about Instagram. I don't know your experience of it.
Yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting, like you said on Instagram, is that I love seeing the photos, but I also like to hear the fishing stories behind it. Because looking at yours is that, first off, I mean, you have these amazing catches, but you also have amazing tattoos, and you just like have this look of just like, this guy's got some stories that I would love to hear. And so for me, it's the same way. It's just, it's a great community. And the thing is, everybody loves to tell a fishing story, because it's not about the fishing, right? It's all about the nature, the experience, and the memories that come from it.
Yeah, look at those tattoos. I mean, what I've tattooed, the one tattoo is, me fishing off the reefs, and you'll see it there in the Instagram. I don't know if I send you the photos. I'm sort of wave deep, and it's a balancing act on a reef, and I tattooed that on my arm. And then I've got a garrick tattoo, because it's such an amazing species, So it's truly about these stories and the experiences that we have, and our connection with our fishing. It's absolutely fantastic.
For the inside scoop on the fly patterns we've discussed with our guest, check our blog for Flies of the February Room. If you would like to enter the February Room, shoot us an email at info@cdfishing.us. Also, remember to subscribe, share, and if we've earned it, give us those 5 stars. Thanks for dropping by, and remember to go fishing.